Hello there, Alan Plum here again with a little more from Shed Engineering. Firstly, sorry I haven't got around to uploading anything recently. I've been very busy with work and one thing and another, and also I've been trying to develop something that's a little bit new. I don't want to say too much about it. I'm trying to develop a URVTS, but until it's perfected and I know that it's going to work reasonably well, then I don't want to say too much. I don't know how many people might be interested in Keith Appleton's videos. If you type in Keith Appleton into the YouTube search, he's got some fantastic videos, all these in one section of old railway films. This one that's playing at the moment is how they replaced a whole section of track from creosote in the sleepers, casting the chairs, and then measuring up the track and relaying it. But he's got a fabulous selection of old videos. There's one there of the Silver Fox, Gresley's A4, going from London to Edinburgh non-stop, and there's some fabulous shots of the A1. So I can very much recommend them, and I'm sure it'll be interesting to a lot of the youngsters to see how it was actually done back in the day. Thanks to all the new subscribers, that's very much appreciated, and it might be worth you checking to see whether you still are subscribed, because over the last, it's not so bad now, but sort of 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, I stopped getting notifications. I used to get a notification when anybody uploaded a video, and so I could keep up to date with everybody, and all I needed to do is just click on the email. It went straight through, opened the YouTube up, and there it was. Brilliant, not a problem. Why YouTube and Google can't just leave things alone rather than messing around? But I ended up getting, I don't know that I can find it, I ended up getting getting this. Act now to make sure you can log into your Google services, right? And if you'd got, if your internet provider was Virgin Media, then Google were no longer going to recognise it. Well, I was Alan Plum 3 at ntlworld.com, and so for me to keep YouTube, I had to change my flipping email address and open up a Gmail account. So I can now get notifications if I log into my Gmail account, so I'm starting to get used to it. But honestly, why they can't just leave things alone, I've no idea. So it might be just worth you just checking to see whether you're still subscribed. So as I say, I haven't done a lot on the layout, but I've got some footage that'll just bring you up to speed, and then if I can get this other little thing I'm working on perfected, then we'll show you what that is. So here we go. I don't really want to call these how-to videos, because everybody has their own way of doing things, and even that changes over time as you gain experience. So there's no right and wrong way of how to do something. Now, we've all seen the Hey Presto videos where all the track and all the sidings is already down, but for a beginner like me, you don't actually see how it was done, or perhaps any of the problems that might arise. I mean, the layout that I've got up to now is relatively simple. It's just 2 circuits, so this is the first time I've had to do anything that's vaguely complicated. And I've found cutting and laying the track is not that critical, but you always come to a point where you end up with a couple of gaps like this that is quite critical, and where you do need to get quite a decent measurement. And the temptation is to try and cut a piece just using your track cutters. Now remember that your track cutters have got a good side and a bad side, but you end up trying to cut a piece like this, and my track cutters would have to be the other way round. And so you try cutting a piece like this, and if it's anything like me, 9 times out of 10 it's either too big or too small. Now a small gap isn't really a problem. It'll allow for a little bit of expansion and contraction, but this is how I have started to deal with the problem. To get quite a accurate measurement, I simply use a piece of paper, and because you're not relying on the thickness of pencil lines or pen lines, you can actually trim the piece of paper down little by little, and you can actually get quite an accurate measurement. Remember that if your track is curving, one track will be one rail will be longer than the other, and that will be even more pronounced if you're working in double O or larger. Then you have to transfer that measurement onto the rail that you're going to cut, obviously. Well, as you can see there, you can actually get a very good crisp measurement by just holding the piece of paper against the line and putting your cutters up against the paper and cutting it. If you have a pair of protractors, then you can get a good measurement using those. But again, the problem comes when you're trying to transfer the measurement onto the track. Again, if you've got thicknesses of pencil lines, or you're trying to scratch it or make a mark, it's at that point it becomes quite imprecise. I'm lucky enough to have a vernier gauge, so I'm taking a measurement with that. But again, the problem is transferring that measurement onto the track. And so I'm using insulation tape, and I can lay that across, and that gives me a lovely crisp edge. But I need to cut on the outside of that. Actually, the cutters need to be where the tape is. And so I've found that if you just use a marker pen, you probably won't be able to see it on the video, but if you use a marker pen like this and just mark it, then when you take the tape off, it gives you a very crisp line that you can put your cutters up against and get quite a nice accurate cut. So on the flexi track, I just shuffle the sleepers down, and you can ease them out of the way before making the cut. Take your time, make sure you've got your cutters right on that black mark. Then obviously you need to take a measurement for the other rail, transfer that onto your piece of track and cut that. You then need to fit the rail joiners, and your piece should be ready to put in place. Now I've edited half a minute or a minute out. It probably took a minute to get that in there, and the same here.
it can be quite fiddly, especially in end gauge, and especially if there's a little burr on the end of the tracks. It's always a good idea to file the track ends before trying to fit them. Obviously, if you've got the track down, then it can be quite difficult to file the ends. So here's another little section. Again, that seems to be the problem every time. You can lay your points and turnouts and pieces of track, but you always end up with these small gaps that you need to fill in. You've just seen me shuffle the sleepers back to give me some working room at the end of the two rails, and because that section's curving, one rail was longer than the other, and so I've just snipped a little bit off to make them a similar length. Then obviously take your measurement, and again I'm transferring that measurement by using a piece of insulation tape. Then fit your rail joiners. Pop your rail joiners on. It did take me a minute or two just to get that section in. This section of track is free to lift up further back. So we can now just gain a little bit of room, try and locate. Now it's easy to edit out several minutes of fiddling around. I've actually edited out where I was filing the ends of the track. But if you're a beginner, don't be despondent. It can be very fiddly. Just like here, I'm resorting to holding the track with the narrow nose pliers to try and get the rails located. Then by doing that, I've moved the rail joiner, so the rail joiner is no longer in the middle, and so it can be very, very fiddly. I've probably damaged the rail in actual fact by gripping it with the narrow nose pliers. It's not well, I haven't found it to be a problem. I just run the file over the rail to make sure there's no little burrs from the narrow nose pliers. So it isn't a matter of hey presto, done and dusted. It can actually take quite a while to get everything located and nicely joined up. Get that in, but that's gone in very, very nicely. And hopefully you can see there what a nice tight fit you've got. Right, we've continued to make a little bit of progress. I've been busy over the last couple of weeks, so I haven't got much done. But we've now got most of the track down. We've got the connection across onto the next folding section, the crossover where the station will be. All the track is now pinned down. A turnout coming into the
little goods yard. Couple of sidings on the left still to be completed. Not quite sure of the spacings and where they need to be. And then obviously it continues on. The head shunt again on the left needs to be completed. And then round into the turning circle. We've got the bus wire now extended down this section, and that's running down to the far end. I explained about the bus wire in an earlier video, but as you can see I've twisted it together, but every so often I've just left it a little bit looser, so there's plenty of opportunity to solder the droppers on. So we've now got several droppers in, and they're going underneath the baseboard and coming up next to the bus wire.
I cover the wiring in more detail in a previous video, but for anybody just dropping in, decide whether the outer rail or inner rail is going to be your live or negative, or your red and black. In my case, the outermost rail is red and the inner rail is black, so just follow that all the way around the track. And so here I'm connecting a red dropper, which will be coming from the outermost rail somewhere. Previously I went to a lot of trouble in wrapping it round and bringing it back underneath. As you can see here, I'm just putting a simple hook on the end of the dropper and pressing it into place. I think I was actually going way over the top previously. Once that's got a nice blob of solder on, I'm sure that's not going to move at all. And then obviously you connect the negative or black droppers in the same manner. So in my case, this black dropper will be coming from one of the inner rails somewhere, and I try and put a pair of droppers into each section of rail, and in doing that I'm not totally reliant on the electrical connection made by the rail joiners.
So we can actually start running all the way around the circuit now. Still got a couple of sticky points, I suppose that's only to be expected. This time we'll try taking her off through the sidings, then cross her back over onto the inner. but I'm just going to bring a train in and try running it backwards and forwards on some of the sidings. As with Graham, he ended up ripping all his track up because he got it laid on foam. Now I'm using like a very thin neoprene rubber, and I think it's a lot firmer. But we're going to try just having a test run backwards and forwards and just see how we go. So we'll bring the ginty tank in. I think the track is a little bit dirty, to be honest. Right, don't like that, does it? It seems to be running all right, apart from when I forget to change the points over. Right, let me try and explain the thinking behind the fiddle yard. A lot of this back section of plywood will have to be cut away, obviously, for access. As you can see, I haven't got a lot of room for lots of sidings, but also I'm not going to be able to afford a lot of rolling stock and a lot of locomotives. And so my idea at the moment is to have 4 re-railers, 2 at this end, 2 at that end. So here we've got a southbound passenger train. You can very quickly turn it into a southbound freight simply by re-railing it, attaching it to a freight train. Likewise, you can have a southbound passenger train pull in and then simply by re-railing it you've now turned a southbound train into a northbound train, and it can pull out and reappear hopefully within perhaps 30 seconds or so. Obviously I would like more sidings, but as I say, I'm very limited for space. You've got to remember that the small goods yard would only be taking local rolling stock. There'll be half a dozen wagons being unloaded at the goods shed, and another half a dozen wagons or so perhaps delivering coal to the coal merchants. So that's the general thinking behind the Fiddle yard, that I can make the best of perhaps just 2 or 3 locomotives to make it look as if there are different trains coming up and down the main line.
And here is the local news for the Wye Valley. Work on the new water pipeline for Bakewell and surrounding area has been progressing. Since the arrival of the railway in the Wye Valley, demand for water has steadily risen. And whilst most residents now welcome the coming of the railway and the prosperity it has brought, they blame the poor water supply on the railway. But in actual fact, locomotives take on water at Roseley, 3 miles back down the line. Yes, they do use many thousands of gallons per day, but most of that is taken from the River Derwent. This new pipeline is coming in from the Ladybower Reservoir and will give a better supply to homes, farms and the station, situated higher up on the hillsides of the valley. Listeners may be interested to know the next signal box just a mile further up the line at Hassop has actually no water supply at all, and every morning water cans are taken up to the signal box by loco from Bakewell station. Many local residents have lodged complaints with the parish council, stating it's yet another blot on the landscape and a total eyesore, as well as a disruption to grazing. But they have been reassured that the pipeline will be buried out of sight and the pastures will suffer no long-term damage. Local residents are also reminded Coombs Road is presently closed to traffic, but they have been reassured it will be resurfaced and will be as smooth as glass paper. Has shed engineering finally gone mad? Or is shed engineering taking N-gauge modelling to the next level by modelling the underground water pipes? Or perhaps residents are having the wool pulled over their eyes. Yeah, that's it. In actual fact, it's the URVTS. Oh dear, I've run out of time. Sorry about that. Hope you found something interesting, and many thanks for watching.